We begin the current Daf, Mesech Bava Metzia Daf in Beis. Begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yamud, where the Gemara finishes up the conversation for the previous Daf. Again, all these Mishnayos are talking about finding a Mציעא, and our previous Mishnah quoted a halacha, which the Gemara qualified, and the Gemara just asked a related question regarding that halacha of what was mentioned in the previous Daf. She's corresponds because in the Chesed, 20 Daf Chaim, today's Daf, and they saw that throughout the entire world. Something to discuss in today's Daf are Zachal Adam Shalei B'fanav. A person could marry a person when he's not there, but Ein Chaval Adam Shalei B'fanav, a person cannot create a liability for a person when he's not there, meaning without his consciousness. The halacha of Abishin Sefer L'Nuach. What's the halacha of when it's in the airspace of a property where it's not going to end up landing? It's going through it's going horizontal, and it's going to go through that area. It's not going to land. Do we say that it's considered part of that property for the person to be zeicha? And Metzias Acher, what's halacha when you find something for someone else, which that relates to cotton regarding a child for his father? The question is, Islay Zchia L'nafshi Midiraisa. Does he have biblically his own zchia, and that relates to his father getting it from him, which that relates to halacha of leket, which the halacha is that the anim get to pick the gleanings that fall down. And there's halacha b'nei malakot acher, that the son could gather after him, and that becomes the question: if the father is, so to speak, a wealthy person and the child is not, well, do we say the son could get it because it's his own zchia midiraisa or not? So we begin the current Daf Yud Beis. We're just finishing up first the conversation from the previous Daf. Gufa, 4 lines down. We said in the Mishnah, Ra'is and Ratzanach Mציעא b'chulu. We had halacha that we said if, let's say, we saw people running after Mציעא, so if it was a broken deer or if it with birds that don't fly, and he said, let my field be zeicha for me, so zachsalai. So on that, Amr B'Yirmi, Amr B'Yechon, and we had mentioned this in the previous Daf, he qualified this teaching, and he said, this is only if he could run after it, and he could reach it, then it's considered within his domain, and then he could be zeicha with it being in this field. On that, we had mentioned that Boyer B'Yirmi had asked a question, however, what would be the halacha regarding if it wasn't a Mציעא, it was someone gifting it to him? Would you also have to have the qualification that Rabbi Yochanan had said that you have to be able to run after it and reach it? On that question, we mentioned that Kiblu Minei Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, he accepted that your question is alluding to something, that you're right, Matan is different, that Afa Pesharat Zachrein Ve'im Agin, even if you would run after it, you wouldn't be able to reach it, you're still kaina. And we mentioned in depth that we said that Das Acheres Machnois is different, that when someone else is transferring it to you, then you don't have to have as much ability as from Mציעא, where you're getting it from no one, and therefore it would be kaina even without that. Now, related to that halacha, the Gemara says the following question: By Rava, Zarek Arndaki, if someone threw a purse, a wallet, Rashi's words are, and he's mafkir it for whoever comes first. Taisa says something which lav davka that is disagreeing, or Rashi is saying differently, but Taisa says not to have the gears of the afkire, that he was mafkir, because the Gemara considers this case as das acheres makna oisai, that someone else is transferring it to the guy who's going to be zeichen it, because we're being a raya from Hatana. If he's mafkir it, that's the case. The moment the purse leaves his hand, it would be hefker. That means to say when the guy would be zeichen, there's no das acheres. So Taisa says not to have the gears of afkire, so it's always his until someone else is zeichen it. Again, you have to know if Rashi means that he was mafkir right when it left his hands. Maybe he's mafkir l'chala koidim, meaning when the guy comes and takes it, then it's his. But either way, the case is that a guy throws a purse, the Pesach zeh, he throws it through one opening, v'yatzav Pesach ach, and it goes out. Some people have their doors lined up, the front door and the back door, and he throws it through the guy's house, and it goes through one door and out the other. Ma, what's the halacha? What's the question? So the Gemara explains like this: Aver shein sefer lenuach. When you have airspace, that it's not going to end up landing in the airspace itself. Kemunach dami? Do we say that it's as if it's placed down over there in that property, and therefore the first balabayis, because you said whoever's first, he said this is hefker. Whoever wants to be zeicha can be zeicha. So do we say the first homeowner that it went through his property, it's like placed down over there, and therefore he was kaina? Or no, maybe it's not like it's placed down over there. So Rashi explains the reason why we're asking the question specifically by Aver she'ein sefer lenuach, by airspace that's not going to end up landing inside the house, if that's kemunach, if that's like placed down or not, because whereas aver that is seifel nuach, airspace that it would end up landing in the house, that says Rashi, that's obvious to us that even if someone else would come along and quickly go ahead and snatch it from the ear, he would not be kainit, because mishenichnas la'aver sounds very similar to mishenichnas la'aver, but when it comes into the airspace, the Baal Bais right away is kainit. As the Mishnah teaches Masechet is given Daf Ayin Tesem Ad Aleph, that if someone was standing on the top of a roof and they threw to his wife a get, once it's nichnas la'aver, once it enters into the airspace of the roof, meaning whichever one that she is her property, she's divorced. Which, so too, let's say he's on the top and she's on the bottom. The moment it leaves the domain of the roof, so if it gets erased or burnt, it doesn't make a difference. She's divorced because the moment it went into the airspace, right away, it would be a kinyan. But that's by Avish Shasayful Anuach, where it's going to end up landing. Here, where it's not going to end up landing, it's going through the airspace. That's the question. What's the halacha? So I'm a papa l'rava. So some say it was Rav Adar bar Masna l'rava. Some say it was actually Ravina l'rava. Three different versions of who said to Rava, but it says Lav Hainu Masnitin. Isn't this our Mishnah? Oh, what's our Mishnah? We said Mציעא. If let's say someone sees people running after a found object. And remember, we qualified, he says, that you have to be able to run after reach it. And Ubayr Birmi, he says, what's Allah by gift? And Vikibni Rabbi Bakandi says, oh, yeah, it's a good question. I get where you're going with that question. That b'matana by gift of Bisharat Zachrin Magian, that even if you would run after you wouldn't be able to reach it, still you'd be kaina. So obviously you see that even though it's rolling and it's going to go out, and it's not going to end up being in your property, you still said that his field will acquire it for him. Because, and that's why Taisa said you can't be Gurz of Avgrade, because when someone's being maknet to him, you don't have to be able to have all the things that we say by Mציעא that you have to be able to reach it. So the same thing is, here when it's not going to end up staying in the property, it's going to run off, you won't be able to reach it, it's still going to be considered as your field was kinded. So that's the same thing here when the guy threw it through your property, although it's not going to end up landing, but it's dasa cheres makna, and you're going to be kaina. To which Amalei, so Rabbi said back to him, whichever the three versions were, miskalgal kamri, tell me about rolling, about running. Shani miskalgal the kamunach dami. When you have a deer or whatever it is, something that's running through or rolling through your property, that's like it's placed down, and therefore that's where you'll say that by matana he'll be kainit. But by an aver, she'ein seifel nuach, that doesn't tell us anything that you would be kaina, and therefore we didn't resolve that question. Now we look at the next Mishnah, continuing this theme regarding a Mציעא, now regarding when it comes to an acher, to someone else. Meaning Mציעא b'no yubita ketanim. The Mishnah tells a list of people that when this person finds it, it goes to the man of the house. If his minor son or daughter finds something, which the Gemara is going to explain why, when his minor son finds something, does it go to the father? Because in contrast, his minor daughter, that the Gemara Ksubas Daf Menvav and Beis learns out from Psukim that a Ketana and even a Naira, which is from 12 to 12 and a half, what's called Kol Shvach Neurim Lavia. All the benefits that the girl gets goes to her father. But the Gemara is going to explain what's the source by a boy. But be that as it may, Mitzias Avdiv Shevchas HaKnanim. And regarding when his non-Jewish slave or slave woman finds something, it also belongs to him because he owns their body and everything that they acquire. Like it says, he totally owns them. And Mitzias Ishtay, if his wife finds something, so the Rabbanan instituted that it should go to the husband because of Ava, as the Gemara is going to say later on, Amud Beis, that because it's going to cause hatred because he supports her, he does all these things, and she finds something and she gets to keep it, we institute that it should go to him. So all these cases are Re'elu Shaloi. It goes to the man of the house. In contrast, Metzias b'nai b'tei gedolim, if his adult sons and daughters find something, or Metzias avdei v'shevchas ivrim, if his Jewish slave and slave woman find something, which the Gemara is going to ask on Amud Beis, that why would a Jewish slave be any less than a worker? Which we said on Daf Yod, that when a worker finds something, it goes to the balabais, because you're working for me, whatever you're doing goes to me. How could a Jewish slave be any less than that? So the Gemara will address that question. And Metzias Ishtei Shegirsha, if his wife that he divorced, his ex-wife, finds something, even if he didn't pay out her ksuba yet, but since she's divorced, that goes, all these cases go to the people that find it, it does not go to the man of the house. Now the Gemara asks, Amar Shmuel, Neima Amr, as we alluded to in the Mishnah, why do they say Metzias Katan La'aviv? Why do they say when the child finds something, it goes to the father? Meaning a minor child, because we understand regarding the case of the daughter and the wife, that the Gemara explains the reasoning why they go to the man of the house, as we already mentioned. But the son, what would the reason for that be? So on that says the Gemara, Shebeshosha Moitza, because when the son finds the Mציעא, Meritza Eitzel Aviv, he runs to bring it to his father, and he, without delay, doesn't leave it in his possession. So therefore, when he picks it up, Rashi explains the lumdus, he's picking it up for the purposes of his father. So therefore, it's like Magbi Metzila Chaveroi, like a Kana Chaveroi, like he's picking it up for his father, and that's why his father gets it. Says the Gemara, Lememra, is that to say the Sabra Shmuel that Shmuel holds, Cotton Leslie Schila Navshe Midaraisa, that a child doesn't have any biblical rights to his Mציעא, because if not, then it should have gone to himself. If he has his own zchiyah, he should get it. How? So it seems like he's saying that the child biblically does not zoich in it, and therefore goes to the father. But says the Gemara, but Tanya learned in a brisa that says if someone hires a worker, the law is yilakid b'nai achrav, that the child is allowed to go ahead and gather the gleanings after him. So meaning the worker's son, if he's poor, could go gather the leket that falls down. Now, however, tells us the brisa, if the worker is accepted as contractual agreement of work in the field, lamechzel shlosh raviyah, that is, he gets either 50% of the profits, or a third, or a quarter, so then he's considered like a wealthy person, and he's like the owner of the field, then the halach is lo yilakid b'nei achrav. Then the child's not allowed to go gather the gleaning after the father, because the leket of the son is going to the father, and the father is a wealthy person. Rabbi Yisrael, he says, no, either way, the son and his wife could go ahead and gather the gleanings after him, because if the father is wealthy and the son is poor, but the son takes it for himself. So that's machlekes Chacham and Rabbi Yisrael. If the father is wealthy, could the son gather the leket or not? Shmuel says, halacha Rabbi Yisrael. Halacha is like Rabbi Yisrael that the son could gather the leket even if the father is wealthy. So says the Gemara, if you're going to say that cotton is leischila nafshe, that the child has his own merits, and like the Bach adds on the word midaraisa, because Taisa explains why we're discussing specifically deraisa, and maybe it's all rabbinic. So it's like, okay, if it makes sense that the cotton has his own zchiyah, so kiko malakit, so he'll say that when he picks it, lo nafshe ko malakit. You're saying biblically he has the rights to a Mציעא. So he's picking it for himself, which he's an ani. His father is wealthy, but he's an ani, so he'll be able to pick it. He'll say, okay, then the father gets it from him. But if you're telling me, as we just established before, that Shmuel holds that, when a child picks up something, he doesn't have any schiyah to himself. Which is a question, how do you know? That's what he's discussing. Maybe he does have, maybe he doesn't have midaraisa, but he has rabbinically, and then the father gets from him. So he says, no, that we wouldn't make two rabbinics if the child really doesn't have a schus. So we say the child gets it rabbinically, then the father gets it rabbinically from the child. We just do it straight to the father. So man of shach wouldn't make sense this teaching, because if you say a child does not have a schila nafshe midaraisa, so kika malaka, that means that when he's picking it up, la'av kamalaka. That means so the child's picking it up automatically for the father. The problem is abu asherhu. The father is a wealthy, quote unquote, a wealthy person, which Tais says lav dafka asher. It just means that since he has a rights in the field, because he's like he's chayiv and leket, so therefore, like we said, if he's a part owner or something, it doesn't make a difference even if he's poor. So then so why could his wife and child gather after him? In other words, there seems to be a contradiction over here. On the one hand, Shmuel tells us that the child, the Mציעא goes straight to his father, and as Tosfos explains, that's assuming that the child does not have any biblical schia for himself. I mean, it doesn't have any schia. So, I mean, it goes straight to the father. Problem is, if it goes straight to the father, how do we understand Shmuel's other halacha that he paskins like he rules like Rabbi Yosi that if the father is wealthy and the child's poor, the child could gather after the father. But if the son was getting it himself, okay, even if he ends up giving it to the father, but it's going to him first. But if you say like Shmuel that no, the moment the child picks up, it's going straight to the father, and that was the takana drabanan, that since he's picking up, he doesn't hold on to it. The second goes straight to the father. But then it's like the father picking it up, and the father's wealthy. So how's he allowed to pick it up? That's the Gemara's question. Says the Gemara, Shmuel, it's not a difficulty because these are two different opinions. Shmuel Taima Ditana Didan Kamar. When we open up our Gemara, Amar Shmuel, B'mnei Amar Metzias Katan La'aviv, Shmuel is just explaining the halacha of our Mishnah. Why is it that when you say a child picks it up, it goes to the father? Our Mishnah holds because the moment that you pick it up, the child's giving it to his father. So yeah, the Katan, our Tana holds, Katan Leslie Schil and Navshe. But V'leila Svirle, Shmuel doesn't hold like that halacha of our Mishnah that a Mציעא Katan goes to the father. He actually holds like Rabbi Yosi. The Mציעא Katan goes to the child. And that's why the child's allowed to pick up the leket, even if the father's wealthy, because it doesn't go to the father, it goes to the child. So it's not a contradiction, he was just explaining the Tana of our Mishnah. But now the Gemara has a different problem. It says, wait a second. Okay, so let's stop our Mishnah for a second. Let's go to the Bryce that we asked Shmuel from, which he ruled like Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi was quoted as saying, if the father's wealthy and the child's poor, the child could pick it up, which we assumed, and we explained it, and that was actually what we used for the contradiction of Shmuel, and that's actually what we're going to answer and say not necessarily, but we thought it was a question. Rabbi Yosi held, obviously Katan has a biblical right to the Mציעא, and therefore it's going to himself, and it's not going to the father directly. So the problem is, Rabbi Yosi seems to contradict himself. But now we learn the Mishnah Masechet Gittin that says, Metzias chereshoyt b'katan, when the deaf, mute, or mentally deranged, or minor find something, the halacha is, yesh behem b'shum gezam nei darchei shalom. The Tanna Kama says these words. He says that because of ways of peace, because really they don't have any rights to acquire something, they don't have intelligence, but because of ways of peace, we say, okay, it's robbing if you take it away from this child or the deaf, mute, or the mentally deranged. Yisim, he says a little stronger wording. He says, no, it's gezel gomer, it's full-fledged robbery. Now, Rav Chizdi explains, it doesn't mean real gezel. It can't be real gezel because they don't have any kinyanim. It means gezel gomer midivreim. It means rabbinically we consider it as full-fledged robbery because of darchei shalom. Now, the question is, nafkimina, what's the difference? Aren't they saying the same thing? Now, the difference of what Rabbi Yosi is teaching us is that the Chacham were more stringent in their takana when he's calling it like gezel gomer, loitzi b'dayanim, that you could even extract it with judges. Okay, but the one thing is that we see is that since biblically the child does not have any schia, as Rabbi Yosi is saying over here that the whole gezel is midivrehen, biblically we say that no, he has no kinyanim. So it comes out that the father is stealing from the poor. How could Rabbi Yosi allow the child to go collecting the leket when the father is wealthy? The whole reason why we thought it, why you're allowed to do that is because biblically we consider it yours first. And even if you end up giving it to Tati, that's okay because you're a poor person, you're allowed to then do whatever it is as you please. But it's seemingly from this this Mishnah in Gittin that we just quoted, BC holds no, biblically there is no. So one would ask, again, that's what Tais addresses, says, okay, maybe it's rabbinically. And then rabbinically we say it goes to the father. No, Tais says, because that wouldn't make sense. You're saying that it always goes to the father, so what's the point of making two rabbinics? Rabbinically, he's zoicha, and for himself, and then rabbinically it goes to, no, it's rabbinic, it's one takana, it would go to the father. So you're back to the question, how are you letting the child go ahead and collect it? So Elam Abaye, Rad Abaye says that actually the question that we started off with wasn't even the difficulty in the first place. This that Shmuel rules like Rabbi Yosi, is Rabbi Yosi also holds like the Tana of our Mishnah, that a child does not have any schia midayraisa. So then the question is, so then why by leket would it be permitted for the child to gather the leket?
Why don't we apply that migu? Why did we forget about the migu?
Which migu?
The father could say, mafker all his possessions. That we learn to blind.
Right, but that wouldn't help with the isser. There's a prohibition of picking leket if you're a wealthy person.
But it wouldn't make him wealthy anymore.
Mumminess, you could say such a thing. What?
You couldn't use this case if you apply that migu. You couldn't use this case to say that there's an isser for the boys.
But migu doesn't help with isser, meaning if you're a wealthy person, you're not allowed to pick up leket.
Right, but the
So
wealthy person can always say, I'm mafker.
No, not for isser. You can't say migu. Migu is only for like a koyach ataina of mammon. But like there's an isser. Like I can't say that if I would have shechted this migu, I could have shechted this. Now that's chazah. Okay, migu, I could have. Right? You can't for isser. It's other name. It's isser or not. So the child. Question is, if the child has no schia, like the Tan of our Mishnah said, it goes straight to the father. So then, how by leket, if the father's wealthy, do you let the son go ahead and pick it? That's for a different reason. That's because since this worker has children and a wife, Asua, they made this field kimisha holchaba nemushes, as if nemushes had already gone through this field, which it's referring to a Mishnah Masechtas Peya that says, when is it permitted for every single person, even a wealthy person, to gather the leket from mishayelchaba nemushes? Gemara later on is going to tell us in Avchaf Aleph, that means what's called lukuti bas lukuti. That means to say that it's been already walked through a bunch of times already, and there's nothing left. From the moment that people saw that people went through more than once, they're masich das already. They're like, okay, no, there's nothing over here. No one's going to come anymore. That the poor themselves have already given up thought. They already gave up hope from the leket of that field. So they think, oh, the guy has his own kids, and he's a poor man himself. His kids for sure took it. So because it's like Yirush and Hefker, that's why they're allowed to. So no, not because Rabbi Yossi holds, and Shmuel holds, and Tanna Mishnah holds that the child has no rights, it goes straight to the father. That's what Mitzi is cut in his la'av. So then we had a difficulty, but Rabbi Yossi says that if the father's wealthy, the child's allowed to pick up leket, but how are you allowed to do it? It's going straight to the father's bank account. Father's a wealthy guy. He says that's even the father would be able to pick it. What do you mean? Because since he has kids, and the kids are poor, everyone's like, no one's going to come anymore. Anyway, they all gave up hope, all on him. They're like, because his kids are there, but the Gemara has a difficulty with that. But Amali Rav Adi bar Masan Abai says, you think you're allowed to put a lion in your field so that the poor should say and run away? Meaning, you're creating a situation by having your kids there that everyone's like, oh, his kids are taken for sure, forget about it, there's no point. So, yeah, right, you're right. Now it's hefker. Now anyone wants, it's like Mashiach ben Musha, everyone could take. But you don't have a right to do that, to put a line, skid them off, and like, okay, now look, guys, we can take our leket for ourselves because all the anim gave up hope. Because really the kids are not allowed to take, because really they're considered wealthy because it goes straight to the father. So how you tell me that because the kids are there, everyone's giving up, so don't let the kids come. So the Gemara, no, El Amar Rava, the Rabbi says, the Ketin Tamid Beis, Asu she'in zeicha kezeicha. They made the ones who have no right like they do have a right. Meaning, you're right. Although the children over here don't have a right, because it's like the Tana of Mishnah that it's really like going to the father straight, they made it like he does have a right. My time says, well, what does that mean? Why would you say that? Because anim gufayu nichalu. The poor themselves, they prefer this takana. So that when they get work, when they're working somewhere else, that their kids will also be able to go ahead and gather. So, although technically, when you're a worker that's getting paid from the kablanis, like you're contractually, you're like an aris, you're getting 50% or you're getting a certain percentage. You're like an usher in the field, and really your kids are not allowed to take it because it goes straight to you. But old aniyim, the consensus is that they would prefer when they're working there, the kids come there and they're on the lunch break and they're picking up Tati's work, whatever he's forgetting, and every poor person would prefer that, and therefore they made that takana she'ein zeicha kezeicha, and it's not like Ari b'teich beisei. But says the Gemara Pliga that this halach of Shmuel, that he explained the reason about Mishnah, that why does Metzias Katan go to Aviv? Because the child has no zchiyah midaraisa, it goes straight to the father, disagrees with Reb Chia bar Abba. Why? Because Reb Chia bar Abba, he actually tells us that loy godel mamish. It's actually not, when you say the adult child, that it doesn't go to the father. It doesn't literally mean an adult. When we said the minor child, Metziah goes to the father, it doesn't mean literally a child. Because that was Shmuel's whole teaching was based on minor versus adult. A child doesn't really have any Metziah. It doesn't have any zchiyah midaraisa, and therefore goes straight to the father. And there was the rabbinic institution that it should go to the father because the child runs anyways to the father. So the Rabbanan said, okay, you don't really have any biblical zchiyah anyway. Okay, well, masak in the rabbinic Metziah, but who's to who? To the father, because anyways he runs to the father. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. It's not about adult and minor, because Shmuel's whole teaching is based on that principle. No, it means, what does it mean then? El Gadol, when we say that the adult child has his own rights, if Samach HaShulchan Aviv, if he is a dependent, like it's called, he relies on his father's table, Zehu Katan, that is a child, meaning his Metziah goes to his father. Why? Because of Eva. Because the father, like, this Kyle younger man, this guy who's working, he started out in business, he's 32, I support him. So the whole reason why we say the Metziah of certain cases, like of Ishta, is because of Eva, because of hatred. Wait a minute, I support you, and then you find something, you have a windfall, and you don't give it to me, right? So therefore, that's the case of Katan. And Katan, the ain't the Samach HaShulchan, but if you have a 10-year-old who's not a dependent, he goes and he works for himself, Zeh Gadol, that's, so to speak, the adult, his Metziah goes to him. So therefore, a very different interpretation, which Tracy explains that this seems to be a machlokes we have elsewhere, but Al Kapanim, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's nothing to do with this idea of, do you have a zchiyah midaraisa or not? It has to do with the fact of Eva, of being independent or not. So it's not about Gadol and Katan per se. It's about like Gadol as an independent and Katan as a dependent. That's the primary criterion. Now, continue halacha. The Mishnah said, "Mitzias avdiv shevchaso ivrim," said that if the Jewish slave or slave woman finds something, say, look, they're Jewish. They're not like the non-Jewish. So therefore, they get to keep it for themselves. Says the Gemara, Amai. Why would he be able to keep it for himself? Lo yehei, the eved should be at most elapoil, should be like a regular worker. Now, Tanya learned the Brisa that Metzias poil atzmoi. When the worker finds something, we said, who gets to keep it? It goes to the worker himself. But says the Brisa, when we say that the worker gets to keep it himself, if the employer had told him, I want you to go and weed for me, or to go and hoe for me. He told him specific things to do. And because those are specific things, anything that's not those things, he's not working for the employer. But if let's say he told him, I want you to do work for me today, and he didn't specify which work he's hiring for. So when he finds something, he goes to the employer, because whatever you're going to do today is working for me. Now, this Eved, when his master requires him, the Eved Ivri, it's for whatever work he wants him to do. So it can't be better than the worker, where the worker finds it goes to the Balabais. So why by the Eved Ivri would it go to himself? So Rabbi Shloimy says, I'll tell you why. Over here we're talking about Eved Noikim Margolius Eskinan. We're talking about a slave, that this Jewish slave is the one who makes holes in pearls, which you have to string the pearls together. Where Shein Rabbi his master doesn't want him to do any other work. Oh, so therefore he doesn't want him to be picking up any found objects. Where if you have Metziah that is worth more than the amount of work he could be doing, it's not a common thing, because this guy he's a very delicate craft, which you charge a lot for that. So if it does happen that he finds a windfall, finds a bag with $1 million inside of it, so that Eved could keep it, and he'll just pay his master the amount of time he took off from not doing his work. Because when the master bought the Eved, he didn't have in mind anything else. So therefore, that's why, in this case, the Mציעא is going to go to the Eved himself. That's one answer. A second approach, Rav Amma, he says, where he picked up the found object all the while doing his work, where he didn't stop doing. He was walking around like a security guard, and as he's walking, he finds this Mציעא. Oh, so therefore goes to himself, because there is no Bittul Malachta. Or approach number 3, Rav Papa Amar, he says that no, he gives a very different answer. He says, this is what we learned in the Brisa, that when the worker finds something, when he was hired for just any type of work, when he finds it, go to the balabais, goes to the employer, that's not actually in general. In general, actually, it would go to himself. But that's Kagan Shesachar Lelakad Metzias. He was actually hired to gather found objects. When would you find such a thing? A guy's hired, you don't hire a guy, usually get a metal detector, walk to the beach, and start trying to find things. It would be talking about the Akvi Agma Bekavri, that what happened was that the river flooded over its banks, and there was a flood of fish that overflowed, and when the water dries up, then you find over there many fish, so people are grabbing fish. He hires someone, he says, do me a favor, Tony, you go ahead and grab as many fish as you could. That's when we said that Metzias HaPoyel is the Balabais. But in general, it would go to himself, and if it doesn't contradict that by the Eved, which is not a case of hiring for Metzias, that it would go to himself. Now the Gemara asks on this halacha, the Mishnah, we said two cases. We said Metzias Avdei v'Shevchasa Ivrim Yerushalayim. So we just discussed regarding an Eved now. Why does it go to themselves? And then one of the cases is the female, is the Jewish maidservant. So the Gemara says, wait a second, what is the case of the Jewish maidservant? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. If she brought 2 pubic hairs, my boy Gabe, what is she doing by a master? But the Brisa teaches us that she leaves with Simanim. Once she produces 2 pubic hairs, she's a Nara, she goes free. And if she did not bring 2 pubic hairs, so wait, if her father's alive, so then it goes to her father. Because we said already in our Mishnah, the Metzias Ketana goes to her father. And if her father's not alive, so what's she doing by the master? She should actually get out of slavery when the father dies. Because like Rish Lakish says, as brought in Masechtas Kedushin, the Jewish maidservant acquires herself, when her father dies, to leave the master's domain, from a Kavachaimer. What's the Kavachaimer? So Rashi brings in the Gemara in Kedushin of Tezayin that if we find by pubic hairs, which does not remove her from her father's possession, because she's by her father as a naira, yet it removes her from the dominion of her master, because we learn that from the pasuk. It says v'yatza chinam, she goes out for free. That's the yimei bagris. Then when it adds in the words ein kasav, without money, that refers to even yimei nairis. So if simonim does not remove her from the father, but it removes her from the adain, so when the father dies, which removes her from her father's possession, because he does not bequeath her to his sons, what the Torah merits in his daughter, that the Ma'aseh Daim does not go to the brothers, as the Gemara learns like Subas Mem Gimel v'snachatem oisn levnechem, that you bequeath them to your sons, which is the slaves, and not your daughters to your sons. So isn't it a kavachema that for sure, if it removes her from her father's domain, for sure it should remove her from her master's domain? So wait a second. So how is this maidservant even in the case that it should ever go to herself? You're telling me that it goes, when the Eben Neshivcha find it, it goes to themselves. Doesn't make sense. You can't have a case that should ever go to herself. Either should be going to her father. And if there's no father, then she shouldn't even be a slave woman. So what's this case talking about? So the Gemara says, what's your question? Didn't we refute Rish Lakish over there in Kedushin? That we said that Rish Lakish's Kabul Chaimer is incorrect? So then it's not true. It could be the father's dead and that she's still by the master. But the Gemara said, okay, but okay, let's refute him also from the halacha of our Mishnah, because how else would you have the shivcha going to herself? So the Gemara, not necessarily. Lo the Islav, I could tell you that the father is alive. So then we had the question, we said, it should go to the father, because she's a katana. Says the Gemara, yeah, my harei and shalahen. What do we mean that when you have a Jewish and male and female servant that goes to them, it means lafuka de rabba, just means to exclude that it doesn't go to our master, but yeah, it goes to our father. We're just calling it shalahen because the father gets it from her. So that wouldn't be another refutation of Rish Lakish. Now I said in the Mishnah Metzias Ishtoi, when his wife finds something, so he said if she's divorced, it goes to her. So the Gemara says Girsha, when she's divorced, it goes to her. Pshita, obviously, she's her own independent person. So the Gemara says she's divorced and not divorced. What does that mean? He threw a get to her. It's not clear if it was closer to her or closer to him in the street. If it was closer to her, then she's divorced. If it was closer to him, she's not divorced. But so we're not sure. Wherever the sages said that she's divorced, but she's not divorced, could mean we're not sure. The husband still has to feed her, and for that reason, we have to let you know when she finds something, it goes to herself. Because when do we usually say that when the woman finds something, it goes to her husband? We don't want there to be any hatred because he's providing for her. He's like, okay, the least they could do is that I get what she finds. Hach over here, where he's divorced her anyway, Isla Eva Eva. Yeah, and it doesn't make a difference. Anyways, there's hatred, so there's no concern, and then we're going to let her hold on to her Mציעא. Now look at the next Mishnah. Continue about regarding Metzias. Here it gets a little bit more complex. We're just going to get started with this sugya and continue tomorrow. But Matzah Shtari Chayv. If someone finds documents of debt, meaning a loan document, let's say. So it depends. If there's shibud karkois, if there's a lien on the guy's property that the lender could collect from, so if you find this document, you cannot return this because Shabez Nefram, and you can't give it back to the lender because the courts will collect with these documents. If there's no lien on the guy's property for this loan, then Yachzer, which he was going to explain what does it mean return or not return. You can return the She'im Bez Nefram hand to Remeah because the courts will not collect with such a document, says Remeah, so therefore you could go ahead and return such a document. The sages, they say, no, either way, you shouldn't go ahead and return them, because the courts will collect from these documents. So it seems like that there's machlekes regarding will they collect from a document that has no achrayis nechasim or not. So the Gemara says, wait a second, what's the case talking about over here? If you're telling me that where the borrower admits that the document was not paid up, he admits to that he owes it. So the question is, kiyesh ben achrayis nechasim. So when there is achrayis nechasim, when there is a shibud there's a lien on the property, so amay lo yachzer. So why are you not returning it? If they're going to come to collect from the people that bought, but that's appropriate that they're coming to collect because he admits, the borrower admits, everyone knows that he owes them the money. And if it's talking about where the borrower did not admit, so how do you understand the other half of the halacha? So why did the mayor say that when there is no achrayis nechasim, amayach, why would you return it? You're right, although that you're not collecting from the property which was sold after that, but you're going to be collecting from the borrower, and why would you collect from the borrower? He's claiming that it was paid up. So it says the Gemara, the truth is we're talking about where the borrower admits. So what's the reason that you don't return it when there's achrayis nechasim, when there's a lien on the property, when there's lekuchas that can be collected on it? Because the Chashim were concerned, shemakas of lilbas ben nisan. We're concerned, maybe this document, for some reason, as we explain in a moment, that maybe it was written that the loan should happen in Nisan. But they love out Tishrei, but they didn't actually end up taking the loan until 6 months later, till Tishrei. But also the mitrif, lekuchas like it in. So now you're going to collect from the people that have bought in those 6 months, who, quote unquote, there's a lien on the property, and you guys bought after the time of the loan, but the loan didn't happen until 6 months later, and because of that problem, we don't let you return it to the lender, even though the bar admits. So the Gemara says, that's the case, then every document that ever comes in front of us, we say, no, you can't collect with it. Because maybe you guys had written to borrow at one time, and you only borrowed 6 months later. So why are you only saying it over here when it fell and someone finds it? Oh, you can't return it to the lender. Why not? The bar admits that it wasn't paid up yet. Because maybe you guys are going to collect from the kuchas from 6 months that really the loan didn't happen yet. So the Gemara says the difference is all documents, there's no flags, there's no flaws, there's no reason for us to suspect it. Hani rei. Here, this document has a flaw because since it fell, that's what's called a reyasa, there's a flaw. Because you could say, if it was kosher, they would have been careful regarding it. You're not so careful, it falls because you're like, yeah, anyways, there's not really such a kosher document because you only borrowed 6 months later and it's inappropriate because it was written like it was earlier and they're going to collect. But because it fell, that's why we're going to start with the concerns and thinking that maybe, even though the borrower is admitting it, if the borrower is admitting it, so good. So when there's no chayes nechasim, you return to the lender, he could collect from the borrower because he's admitting it. But for the chayes nechasim, that we're concerned for. Thank you to any time for hosting us.